Slip stitch ribbing is one of the simplest, cutest ways that you can add ribbing to any crochet project. It can even stand as a crochet project on its own, as you can see that I have done here with these super cute coasters that sit on my coffee table because I just love them. So today I'm going to give you step by step how you can create slip stitch ribbing for your next crochet project and add this skill to your crochet toolbox. This is Solo Stitching and I'm Lavina Perry. Let's stitch. So I have this little sample of crocheting that I'm going to be working with today so that I can demonstrate how to connect slip stitch ribbing to an already existing edge. But slip stitch ribbing can stand on its own, and I will tell you the difference as we're going along. It's very simple and it's literally just one stitch that you would not do. So I am using a size K 6.5 millimeter hook today so I can make it bigger so that it's easier to see the stitches as I'm working on them. You can use any hook to do this stitch, any size hook. The smaller the hook, the smaller the stitch is. So a smaller stitch is going to be a little more tedious to work with, but if you are looking for something that's just really fine and delicate to add to the end of a project to create ribbing, this is my favorite kind of ribbing for crochet. So in order to get started, I'm just going to chain 6, and if you're stitching along you can just use any medium worsted weight yarn to do this. If it's smoother, that will be easier for you to work with. So let's see, there's 4, 5, 6. So now we're going to turn the project, and before we turn, actually let's talk about the anatomy of a chain stitch. So this is the front of the stitch. You can see each stitch has 2 sides, so it has a bottom loop and a top loop, and we call them top and bottom because when we're working side to side. This will be the top, this will be the bottom, and they form a little V. Okay, so if we flip that over and look at the back of the stitch, you can see there is this one little loop that goes across, and I call that the back loop. I don't know what other people call it, but that's what I call it. So to get a really nicely finished stitch without stretching out those chain stitches, I like to work into the back loop of the chain stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook into this back loop, and I'm going to pull up a loop, and then I'm just going to complete a slip stitch. And I'm going to do that all the way down. And if your chain stitches are a little tight, this is one stitch that you will want to have sort of a looser gauge. Just be mindful of it. If you're having a really hard time getting your hook through the loop and completing the chain stitch, you probably need to loosen up your gauge. So we're going to insert into that back loop, pull up a loop, and complete a slip stitch. And then we're on to our last one. Insert, pull up a loop, and complete a slip stitch. This is what we've created from this angle. And now to connect it to this stitching, I'm going to insert through the next stitch in this last row of stitching, and I'm going to pull up a loop and complete a slip stitch. And now I'm going to turn it around, and this is I wouldn't say the most difficult part, but it is really important that you understand where you are inserting your hook into this next row so that you're not stitching into the wrong one. So if we're here and then we turn it around, it would make sense logically. You would think that you are going to be working through this stitch here, okay? But you're not. So we're going to turn the stitches, turn the work over to the top so you can see a whole nother, you can see the 2 loops of each stitch on the top here. And we are going to be working into this top loop only. So once I have turned my project and then looked at the top, so turned it so I can see the top, I'm going to insert my hook not into this first one, into this second one, just into the top loop. And I'm going to pull up a loop and complete a slip stitch. And I'm going to continue that all the way down. And if I've gotten my gauge and my tension right, then this will not be super difficult and I won't struggle that much to get through that loop. If I have not been mindful of my tension, then I'm going to struggle and it's going to be really tight. So we're at the end, I've pulled up a loop and now I'm going to complete that last slip stitch. And then we are going to chain 1 and turn. And we're going to do the same thing all the way down. Again, this would look like the stitches that you would think that you would be working into, but we're going to turn to look at the top. And I just like to bring my yarn around the back. I just feel like it gives a nicer finish rather than just so how it was when I turned. I had my yarn here, so theoretically I could just pull that over and work into this stitch here, but it's actually, when I do that, it's twisting this chain stitch. You can see how the chain stitch sits like this. When I do that, it's twisting that chain stitch. So when I'm doing slip stitch ribbing, I'm really cautious about bringing my yarn to the back so that when I'm working into the stitches, it's not twisting this chain stitch, which gives it kind of just a funky little look. There's nothing wrong with it. It's probably just me being fussy, but that's what I like to do. So I'm not going to be working into this chain stitch that I just did. I'm going to be working into this stitch, which is the first stitch. And pull up a loop and then complete the slip stitch. And I'm going to complete that all the way down. Once you've identified the stitches you're supposed to be working into, it's really easy to stay on track. It's just making sure that you turn it so that you're looking at the top before you proceed. Okay. Now on this one, I need to make sure I'm getting into that back loop of the stitch and not into the end here. And then I'm going to complete the chain stitch. And since I'm to the row, instead of doing the chain stitch like we saw here when I did a chain and then turn, I'm actually going to insert my hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, and complete the slip stitch. And then I'm going to turn. And again, I'm going to put my yarn to the back, not that way, because I don't want to be pulling on this last stitch and making it twist. And then there's the end stitch. We're going to skip that one and we're going to work into this next stitch. And we're just going to complete a few rows so that I can show you how great slip stitch ribbing looks at the end of a project, and you can imagine what it would look like as the cuff on a little baby sweater or on a hat. It's a really flexible, which I really like. If you've watched a few of my videos, you probably know it's my biggest complaint about crocheting, which I love crocheting, but it does have one disadvantage, and that is flexibility in the stitching. So here we are at the end, and so you can see this is like a little end loop. That was the chain stitch that we made. We don't want to work into this. We're going to work into this last loop of the last stitch here. Insert, pull up a loop, and complete the slip stitch, and then chain one. And we're going to turn, and you can just stitch along. I'm not going to talk you through this one so you can see if you've got it, and then we'll do a couple more rows together. So I'm just slip stitching all the way down. And you can see I got this stitch a little tight, so now it's going to be a little pickle to get into that stitch. And I'm just going to let go of my yarn so I can help myself out here. And that's why watching your tension is so important. And I mean, if it's way too tight and you just cannot get your hook through that top loop, you might have to just pull it out and go back and redo it. And that's totally fine. That's all part of learning to crochet, is learning to pay attention to all of those little things that are important little details. There, we got it. Okay. Plus, if you keep your tension even, it's just gonna have a nicer look for you when you're doing projects, because everything will just be even and nice. And that's just something that you learn as you go along. It's not something that you need to worry about perfecting right out of the gate. That's something that comes with time and practice. There we go. 2 little tight stitches there. All right. Okay, so now we're back to the beginning. So I'm going to insert through the next stitch, pull up a loop, and complete a slip stitch before we turn. And I'm going to turn this way just so that it's easier not to get it twisted. I'm gonna go ahead and finish a few of these little rows, and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like as a little cuff. So I am almost done with this slip stitch ribbing. I hope that you were able to practice a couple of rows so that you could get the feel of it, and just to get the tension issues. That's really like the biggest thing with this, is just if you can get the tension figured out, then you're good to go. And I haven't had any problem on any of these rows, so now the last row is gonna be a pill. Okay, so we're gonna slip stitch into this, and then we'll do our last 2 passes here. And we'll be good to go. And then I'll add some pictures of some other another project that I used slip stitch ribbing for, so you can see the different uses of it and how it really does just look like traditional ribbing, and it's just really cute and nice and stretchy. You don't want something really restricting like around your head or around a little baby wrist or something. So the slip stitch ribbing is really nice in that it gives you that that flexibility that you're looking for, something nice and stretchy that is easy to make and looks really nice. All right, so we're to the end, and all I'm gonna do to finish it off is just another slip stitch, and then I'm gonna cut it. There we go. Finish that off, and then I'll just use a yarn needle to weave this end in, and then you can see the ribbing at the end here. And look at how stretchy this is compared to this. The amount of flexibility is really, really great. So that is slip stitch ribbing in a nutshell. And if you want a pattern that you can practice on, I'll put that down in the description for you. And make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and you can also go over and follow me on Instagram or on TikTok. I have lots of little tutorials, inspiration, and a lot of advice about self-care and setting boundaries and using crochet and creativity as part of that for yourself. So until next time, happy stitching.